next. Okay, so this is pretty basic, but start with what you know. And you want to check in with your relatives and you want to start with the oldest living generation first. I don't know if you're like me, but so many times I say, why didn't I ever ask my mother or my grandparents this question? I wasn't into genealogy earlier in my life, and questions hadn't occurred to me. So if you are fortunate to still have a generation above you, make sure that you get the questions in there now and see what they remember. What's in the attic? So check for those old photos. They're the family stories. And then we said, yeah, sometimes those family stories are stories. They're that have been embroidered over the years. We often hear, that some of the common ones, it's like you had a Native American ancestor, or, your ancestor fought in the whatever war. That's something that's pretty provable, but some other things these stories that you hear, there may be a grain of truth to them, but a lot of times they've gotten embroidered. So, take them under advisement. Think maybe there's something to this. Who knows? All right. Where is my clicker here? There we go. You have to start at the end, not the beginning. It's a weird way I was trying to phrase this, but as I said, not your purported Mayflower ancestor. So if you try to start up with, say, I don't know, who's a Mayflower person? One of the Mayflower passengers, and you're going to start there and say, well, my great grandmother told me we were related to him or her. And so you go to their thing on the tree and you start tracking it down. Well, they probably had 10 or 12 children, and each of them may have had 10 or more children. And by the time you start stretching it out, you're going to have way too many choices of where to go to try and get back to yourself. So you really need to start with yourself, your parents, their parents, and work your way backwards. Much more efficient than try to do it the other way. I do sometimes go down from the top when I get a name that's maybe the same name as a famous author or somebody, and I think, well, I wonder if I'm related to them, and try to track it down that way. But it's not the best way to proceed. And I think of the one I just found. I'm listening to a book about George Washington and all his spies, and it was Nathan Hale. He descended from Elder John Strong, who is also in my tree. It's like, oh well, Nathan Hale was one of my cousins. Okay, start out being organized. I said it's like parenting or substitute teaching. We say, well, I'm just going to start out kind of lax and I'll tighten things up later. Well, again, not a great way to go. I am not the best person to be saying this because my genealogy materials are not totally organized, especially the paper materials. I did do a presentation one time on how you can color code and store your materials. And I got really into buying all the office supplies because I love office supplies. And but the papers are still sitting there and they're not in those files yet. So try to be organized from the start. Keep track of where you don't find anything. And that's another thing I'm not great at. I have a couple of examples I'm not going to go to today for the sake of time, but you can keep a log of the things that you didn't find, because otherwise you waste time. I know I've done this myself. Either I go into Ancestry, I haven't been in for a while, I start looking for something and I realize I have it in my tree already. Or I realize I already did this search and I didn't find anything the first time. Although sometimes, things do appear over time. So it can be worth doing the same search twice, but it's a good idea to keep track of what you've done and found and not found.
Yeah, and the converse of that, Carol, is what you do find, however you record it. Carol and I are opposites. She likes to put everything in digital format. I like to print it out on paper, but either way is fine, but record where it came from. And when we do research here, research projects, and Cece, for instance, will assist, and she'll hand me something, and great find evidence. Where
Yep.
did you get it from? Well,
Uh,
usually she
in the
records that
computer.
down, but I make the same mistake, and I'll have a great piece of evidence, but when you're dealing with reams and reams of paper in a project, you're not going to remember where you got everything from. So that is such a fundamental thing. Make some type of notation somehow where it came from, the source.
This comes, from my years as a teacher. I would, first of all, I'd always encourage the kids, if they photocopied something, to photocopy the title page as well, because I can't tell you how many times a kid came up to me 2 months later with a photocopy, not and with nothing about what it came from, and said, "Do you know where this came from?" So that's why I do try to keep track of that information. Almost everybody uses a computer nowadays. I hardly ever hear of anybody who's just using paper. But if you're one of those people that started 20 or 30 years ago, that you probably didn't have a choice. There weren't computers yet. So, but it's good to have both. I think I wouldn't. I had some guy said I never use paper, and I'm like, well, I mean, think of all those cool documents. If you end up with a real original document, that's paper, and you're going to want to hang on to that. So it usually ends up being a mix. Okay, you don't have to spend a fortune to do genealogy. You can if you want to. There are lots of wonderful organizations to join and databases. A family search is always free, so that's a great one to use. And it's, I think, the largest collection of material out there as well. Ancestry, as we all know, does cost, and I try not to look at it. It just like automatically goes out of my credit card. But if you didn't want to spend the money on Ancestry, most public libraries now have the Ancestry Library Edition available, and you can go in and use it. You can't build your tree there, but you can definitely get the information. Use your local library. They may have, a lot of local libraries have really great little local history collections. I know Middletown here has at the Russell Library, they have a whole room with local historical materials. There are a lot of free templates and handouts online, so you can just Google whatever kind of thing you're looking for and get a free copy. And the state library in Connecticut, probably other states as well. They have, as a public library user, you generally have access to some databases as well. And the Connecticut State Library has a great list of A to Z. Some of theirs, you just have to have a public library card. A few of them, you need to have a state library card.
Hmm.
And that is free, and you can actually sign up online. If you want details, contact me later and I'll give you the details on how to sign up for it.
Yeah,
Also,
and they also have well, it comes and goes, but I believe they still currently have access to Fold 3,
yes,
the top database for military records
Yeah.
that you can access from home through, if you're a member. Now, I believe they limit those memberships just to Connecticut residents. I don't think they grant them, at least that was the case. I think it still is, so.
right. But I imagine a lot of other state libraries are the same way. I would not be very surprised if Massachusetts didn't have some great resources as well, because they tend to have a great interlibrary system. And then if you're a Godfrey member, don't forget My Heritage is free with your membership. Again, you can't do a tree there, and you can't do their crazy, I shouldn't say crazy, they're cool stuff with photos where you can colorize them and then you can make them move. And I don't know, I think it's kind of creepy personally. But again, they have lots and lots of information and you can access that for free. Go to Godfrey first and go to the our resources list and external databases and get in there from there, and you'll get in for free.
You will find that I have found that they have some stuff that Ancestry doesn't have. But if you're just focused on some of the basic records like census records, et cetera, they will have all that, just like Ancestry does.
All right, so money well spent. You're gonna have to spend a little bit of money. We definitely recommend doing your own software program. So you may have a tree online. There are a couple of different places you can do that. But the Yankee in me is like, okay, what happens to that? What if that cloud goes down, or, who knows? I want my own stuff right here in my house on my computer. So when you have your own software program, you can keep your own records. You can oftentimes coordinate online with Family Search and Ancestry. Although Al can tell you, we've had some funky things with that. You said you want to make your changes on your own software first, right?
No, you want to make the changes at the Ancestry level. Or let's put it this way, don't make changes in both of them and then try to sync. You're going to get duplicate records. So what we do here is we have a private ancestry account just for our researching functions. And we build our trees in there when we're doing projects. And then we will sync it down to Family Tree Maker. The reason we do that is because Family Tree Maker has much, much, much more charting capability than Ancestry does, and also other types of reports. But we generally, in other words, the master for us will be the tree we build on Ancestry.
And there are many different software programs out there. There used to be fewer for Macs. That's why I ended up with Family Tree Maker. It was one of the few that were for Mac, but I believe, what is that one that Laura uses that she really likes? Anyway, it's a very popular one. It was for PCs originally, but it's available on the Mac
That's
too.
I think that's Roots Magic.
Yes, Roots Magic, yeah. And there are lots of articles online. You can just Google it, and people do workshops too on comparing the different software programs. It's like anything I find with software. It's like there's no one perfect one out there. Each one is going to have some feature you really like, but they don't have this other feature you're looking for. So you just kind of split the difference and find one that works for you. Yep, that's what I just was saying about that. And you want to definitely join the Godfrey and or your local historical society because A, they need your support, and B, they have wonderful resources for you. Make sure you have a local library card. And again, in most states, that'll give you access to some products that are available on a statewide basis. And there's a link I'm not going to do today, but as I said, if you want to know details on getting a Connecticut State Library card, let me know and I will get you in there. Okay, so pedigree charts are one of the main ways we store the information. And this is what people did before we had the online ancestry trees. And basically, you're looking for birth, marriage, and death for your ancestors, starting with yourself and working back to your parents, their parents, your great-grandparents, etc. And so here's a little close-up. So in here, they're looking for name, birth date and place, death date and place, and marriage date and place. This is the one from the National Genealogical Society, and you can download that for free. This is also from the National Genealogical Society, some of their little hints. So don't abbreviate. It's tempting, but when you come back later, you don't want to be faced with an abbreviation and you can't remember what it means. Enter the full name, everything you got there. So first, middle, and last. They suggest you put surnames in capital letters. I have a variation on that. I do my direct pedigree bloodline. I put them in capital letters. That way, when I'm looking at my tree, which I build out to the sides quite a bit, and I'm way back a few generations, I'm like, where do I fit with this person? And if the ancestors are in capital letters, I can track it down, see where I am. For women, you want to put their maiden name in there, not their married name. So I find sometimes in Ancestry, I will put the mother, I'll put her maiden name, and sometimes I don't know yet who the father is. You're going to put his name. You're assuming that the child has taken the father's name, but you might have to leave things blank for a little bit until you find the complete information. And you want to write the dates. I read somewhere this is military format for doing a date. I always thought it was just genealogical, but that's the first time I had seen it. But it's really helpful to avoid confusion. When you put the number of the day first, then the month written out, and then the year in numbers. And that way the numbers don't get confused. If you're used to going back and forth with European dates, they do them backwards from the way we do them. So they do the month first and then the day. So when you write it out this way, there's no confusion. And place names, you want to do the city, the county, the state, and then, if you're doing internationally, you'd put USA, you'd put the country too. Okay, and there are also family group sheets as another way to organize your data. So you start with a husband and wife and their children, all their children, and that's what goes on there.
So these charts are particularly effective if you're at if you come here to Godfrey and you're finding information rather than just scratching it out on a piece of paper, or if you're somewhere else. And then, then when you get home, you can then enter them into your tree wherever you're using it. Where I don't think we're advocating you build out your entire family tree of thousands of names on paper, but it's particularly useful to keep yourself organized when you're at a research site gathering some information.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, so here's just a little close-up of a family group sheet. All right, now we're going to go through the basic types of records. There are, again, we're doing the basics. So there's some unusual sorts of data that you can find. And there are lots of, webinars and talks and articles about them, but we're going to cover the basic ones and somewhat in the order you would want to approach them. So vital records I have at the beginning. We recommend doing the census first, but I have it second in this presentation. So vital records are your birth, death, and marriage information, and it might be a certificate if it's more recent. It may just be a register. It might be some kind of, a list, almost like a spreadsheet of that information. We get people, they'll call us and they'll say, I need my great grandfather's, birth certificate from 1763. We're like, you're not going to find a certificate, but you might find the information. Okay, censuses. We like them because especially with Family Search, their organization at this point is pretty much geographic. So it really helps to know where your ancestors were living when. Church records can be very useful, especially earlier dates. I remember when I first started doing genealogy and I was stuck on something and I talked to an old timer and she said, well, have you checked church records? And I like, well, my family, like they weren't big church goers. I mean, my immediate family. And I realized later that in the early New England, everybody pretty much went to church, and church was where the records were kept if the town wasn't keeping them. So, the church and state had not been separated. They were pretty much one and the same. So church records can definitely, especially if you can't find those vital, it's a great place to go. Newspapers, as we know, there are many old-timey newspapers that have been digitized more and more. You can also find original copies at some libraries and repositories. So also biographies / local histories. Again, I said if you go to your local library or historical society, they may well have these. The end of the 1800s into the 1900s was a very big time for these kinds of publications. It was they were having the 100th anniversary of the country. The war was over. The Industrial Revolution had taken hold. People were doing well. And lots of these genealogies, biographies, local histories were written at that time. Military records, and Al mentioned Fold 3 is really the online database to search. Also, obviously, you might be checking in with the National Archives, NARA, in DC. And then we have immigration records and ship's manifests. And wills, probate information, court records. And last but not least, land records. It's surprising what you can find in land records. I know it's not one we think of first off, but sometimes it saves the day. Oftentimes in the wills as well, but they'll often give you a hint as to the children and the names, especially for the women, the names of the men they married.
Well, and also Carol will get to this later, but at Family Search, they have advanced the technological world in genealogical research with their full text searching. And the first databases they attacked were probate records and land records. So they have the ability to now, and it's in their beta test site, but you can access it to read the old handwriting and pull out names that would be in a land record more than just who was buying the land or selling the land. So that opens up a lot more names involving land records, like children, as Carol said.
Yeah. Also the neighbors, you see who the neighbors were. if you're doing that fan club, what is it? What's that stand for? It's family. Is it family? No, I'm trying to think what it stands for, but it's like all the people that were surrounding the person you're researching, not necessarily their direct ancestors, but people that live nearby. Now, so we're going to look at them singly. So births, deaths, and marriages. For each one, we're going to look at where you can find them and what they're best used for. Because of privacy laws, the access to some of these, it varies from state to state, and sometimes it's 75 years, sometimes it's 100, and unfortunately, there have been instances lately of it getting more restrictive rather than less. They can be kept at the town hall, or sometimes the health organization will keep it. If we're here in New England, we're very town centered in terms of our keeping our data, but in the rest of the country, it may be at a county courthouse. That might be where you're going to find these vital records. You can order them through this organization called Vital Check, and we have had mixed results with them. They end up costing sometimes more than you expect they're going to. There seem to be little charges added as you go through, and we have had instances of literally years before we got the information from them. We do have generally pretty good luck with calling a town clerk or the town hall and finding out if, they'll share, or they, if you can get the information directly. Just be polite.
Yeah, you'll also find that more and more towns, like here in Connecticut, the city of Hartford has linked up with an outfit called Permitium. That's Permitium. And the towns are retaining, it's a software company, and to ease the process of towns complying with requests. And it's more than just vital records, maybe licenses and things like this. Our experience, at least so far with Hartford, it works very, very well. And it's cheaper because there isn't like the case of Vital Check, where they have to pay people to literally go to the hall records or whatever. So you're going to see that more and more with the larger towns in particular. And so far, it works very well.
And what these are good for, if you're doing a lineage society, you have to have these, at least for the first few generations back from yourself. So. And often they can provide the link between generations. Again, a big concern with lineage societies. That, you need to know that this actually was the mother and father of your grandfather. Okay, censuses. So as you probably all know, the available ones now are from 1790 through 1950. 1950 was just released. Was it 2 years now or a year ago? Almost two, I think.
Yeah.
There is no 1890 census. There's a very interesting article in, I think it's called Prologue, is the magazine of the National Archives, about the 1890 census. It was subjected to fire. There probably was a fair amount of data that could have been rescued, but it got trashed. It just decided, it was the Librarian of Congress ultimately who put the kibosh on it, said, yeah, just get rid of it. And all the future genealogists just cried. So you can find these on Ancestry, Family Search, the Census Bureau. Census Bureau just has the 1951. And I forgot to add in here MyHeritage as well. Some states also did their own censuses between the decades, sometimes in the 5-year. So those can be really useful too. And if you go on the research wiki on Family Search and look up your state, they will tell you whether there were state censuses or not. So this is provides link between the generations, and it's really great to be able to, as we said earlier, follow that family over time, see where they were, did they move around? Oftentimes you can pick up family members that you weren't aware of, that may be a child who died young, and you can find those in the census. Okay, church records. As I said, even for non-churchy families in early New England, pretty much everyone went to church and there was no separation of church and state. You can find these on Ancestry and Family Search, and MyHeritage will have church records as well. Your state library may have them, your local historical societies, and obviously the churches themselves. Sometimes they haven't kept them. We've had instances, couple instances here where churches have either lent them to us or given them their records, and we've digitized a lot of them. So they're good for dates of birth. Sometimes you have to be careful because it could be baptism, which is not always the same. It's actually rarely the same as the actual date of birth. You can find out where and when people were married. And here's another instance of where you can find children in the family. They may not be in the census. They may have been born in between those 10 years and died before the next census. So this may be the only place you find them. And the date and place of the death and burial. Okay. All right, newspapers. There are a lot of paid databases. It would cost you a lot to subscribe to all of them. Newspapers.com is probably one of the best known ones, and you can add that for extra money to your subscription with Ancestry. If you are a Godfrey member, you get access to Newspaper Archive for free. There are a lot of good free resources too. Fulton postcards. I don't know how many of you are familiar. We're not going to go look at these today, but this is a guy, Tom Trinisky from Fulton, New York, who just made it his thing in life to digitize as many newspapers as he could. And he has more than the Library of Congress at this point digitized. Speaking of Library of Congress, they have Chronicling America, and that's a great database of newspapers. We have on our website, if you haven't been there, check it out today. We have our grid of websites basically that Kathy Maxim puts together for us. God bless her. Kathy is at the Mayflower thing today. Hi, Kathy. But she goes through and she keeps this up to date too. If you do go on and you find things that are outdated or not connecting, let us know and we'll fix them. But there is a category for newspapers in there, and then it's divided down by every state. So you may find some resources there. Your state library probably has quite a few old newspapers. There's the Ancestor Hunt. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but they have a mailing list and he has a website. And he keeps a list of newspapers by state. You can get marriage and death announcements there. As time went by, they got more complicated and detailed. Obituaries as well. Sometimes the obituaries are a gold mine because they'll tell you who in the family is still surviving. And so you pick up a lot of family members and family names there. You can get wonderful, like the little town gossip columns and tragedies. I had a ancestor who this 10-year-old boy fell off a swing and died, and he ended up in the newspapers. As is the case today, still people are fascinated by stuff like that. So you might find an article about a family member if they had something tragic happen, and it may be in a whole nother state.
So there's also with the obituaries, if you're with the recent immigrant family, let's say back in the 1800s, and if they went to live in a small town somewhere, and you just don't know where they came from in, let's say, Ireland or some other country, odds are the immigrant went to live with people they knew. Might have been other family members, might have been other people from their town. So this would be the fan concept, looking at others who lived in this town and looking at their obituaries, because oftentimes it would be mentioned where that person was born. And that gives you a clue. That doesn't mean necessarily the person you're interested in was born in that town, but it gives you a clue, something to go look at. Otherwise, you're on a wild goose chase if you're trying to look throughout all of Ireland for a particular person. It has worked for us here in the past.
And this is my mother's family came from Lyme, New Hampshire. And so someday I'm going back up to Concord and I'm going through all those newspapers because New Hampshire has not been so good about digitizing their papers as many other states have. But they have it on microfilm. But this is my favorite little thing here. A cow belonging to David Pushy disputed the right of way with J.R. Pierce in his auto. Result, the cow lost a horn and Pierce his temper. So they often have little digs in there in the newspaper. Whoops, I just lost my share here. Back here. Okay, there we go. Okay, these biographies in the town and county histories, as I was mentioning earlier, beginning of the 20th century, end of the 19th, the war was over. We had the centennial, patriotism, nostalgia were what's the word I want? Rampant, I guess. And this is generally the men of means as a result of the Industrial Revolution. You're not going to see quite so much of your humble farmer ancestors, but you may well find a little family description in one of these books. And these were done on the town level, the county level, and the state level. Also, a lot of family genealogies were written at about that time. And you can find these in libraries and local history collections. Also, the Internet Archive, if you're familiar with that, you can go in and put like Lyme, New Hampshire history in quotes and then do Internet Archive, and you may well find some great things. So as I said, these are good for the men of means, basically. But it definitely gives you context for your ancestors' lives and where they were living. The genealogies, you think, well, they might be more accurate because they're closer to the time when, these people were born. They're only a couple generations off. But they didn't always get it right. And some of them were pretty good about citing sources, but many of them weren't. So you have to use those with a grain of salt.
Yeah, in fact, most of them do not provide sourcing. So as a general statement, there will be exceptions. Lineage societies will not accept that as a source for documenting a line, ancestral line going back. But it gives you, at a minimum, gives you clues. I think the attitude is the people who put these books together weren't trying to deliberately lie or deceive you. They just might have made some honest mistakes, but the vast majority of it will be correct.
And we have sometimes used them with other resources when we were helping people with lineage applications. Sometimes that's the only thing you can find for that family at that time period, and you combine it with some other things, and so you might be able to make your argument with that. So military records, there's some on Ancestry and some on Family Search and some in MyHeritage, but the biggest collection is in Fold 3. And most of those originated at the National Archives. And again, if you live in Connecticut, you can get access to it for free with a state library card. Now at the National Archives, they have the pension records. The Revolutionary War has been all digitized. The Civil War, they're working on, I believe.
No, they're maybe eventually, but there are a few files. Widows, New England widows files are online, I believe. But for the most part, they're still trying to finish up the War of 1812 pension files. They're getting close. So you really have to put in either a request to them, or a couple of years ago we had a speaker, Brian, I forget his last name, who specializes in getting Civil War pension files for quicker and less cost than submitting your request right to the National Archives.
Reinhardt.
And there are competing services out there too. If anyone's had any experience with that, please speak up what you've found and what sort of records may be in there. But as Carol said, all the Revolutionary War ones have been that were for what we call Continental Line soldiers, Washington's Army, are available online. Some states granted pensions separately, and that will be a different story where you find those. But regardless, the pension files are great sources of information.
Yeah, they have, the widows particularly, they had to prove that they were married to that person. So
Right.
you can find actually, specific genealogical records in those files, not just military details. I'm just quickly looking here in the chat, and thank you, Barbara. Fan is friends, associates, and neighbors. And Barbara Curran says that Gopher Records is a great resource for getting pensions. And it's Brian Reinhardt is the guy that we've had.
Reinhardt, yeah, that's his name,
Yeah.
yeah.
I wanted the land warrants from the War of 1812. I went to the archives. Took me 6 months, never got any answer at all. Contacted Brian, got it within a week or two.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
great.
he's
He knows
really
his way
good.
around. Yeah.
Y-
I did go, and I did manage to see my great grandfather's Civil War. I got his file and I got to look at these pieces of paper that he had signed. It was really pretty cool. It's a little bit of a pain. They're not the most helpful people in the world, I would say. Although I did have one woman that was very nice, but it's, you have to put your request in and it's got to be formatted just right. And they do one pull a day. And if you don't get it that day, you're kind of stuck. Okay. And you can get details about the actual military actions. I had an ancestor that was pretty fascinating. He was on a privateer out of New London, and they got captured, and he ended up in one of the prison ships in New York Harbor, and he survived, which not a lot of people did. Okay, immigration, ships manifests, naturalization papers, these are really time dependent. So if you're looking earlier, it's harder to find them. They didn't legally have to keep track of all of this until later in the 19th century. So if your immigrant came in before then, there are lists out there. There's actually, I think I have it in here, the PILI, the Passenger Immigration List Index, which is many, many volumes. But we have the online version of that, and you have access to that as a member. Everybody knows Ellis Island, but before Ellis Island, there was Castle Garden between 1820 and 1891. And Steve Morse, you probably are familiar with. He's also our programmer of our website. And he has this wonderful their wonderful website of one-step answers to various things. And that's a great place to go when you're looking for immigration records.
So
Don't
they
York's not, go ahead, Al.
I was going to say the federal government started, they said passed a law in 1819 saying we want lists now. So 1820 is the first year. And the however, the information on those early lists was very, very limited. And you have a further complication that the ones who came into New York City, the ship captain turned in the list to customs, the customs department, and customs copied it to their own lists and then proceeded to throw out the original uh, captain's list. So, there could be transcription errors, other types of errors that might have happened. That was not true in the other ports of entry like Boston and Philadelphia, Charleston, et cetera. So it wasn't until when the feds took over the whole process in 1906, the amount of information that was gathered on the list was greatly expanded and included places like the birth location of the immigrant. So that really opened up things at that point in time. And the original ship captain's list was what you found in people coming into New York City. So I think a question just popped up, Carol, about Canadian ports. You just did some, I think you just
Yes,
attend a webinar on that?
I did. Yeah, there's a museum in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I think it's called Pier 21. And they have a website that they were kind of touting. Now, it doesn't get down to the specifics of, people's names, but it has three lines running. One is what was happening historically. It has the native populations, what was happening, and forget what the third one is. But that's one place. That's something I need to find out myself because I have an Irish great grandmother who came over, and I'd like to find out more about that. Not sure if Ancestry
Yeah,
has.
the lists in Canada are don't go back nearly as far as
Right.
we have. But you may find that a lot of Irish would have gone first to Canada because the ship passage was less, and then would have come to the United States. Now, if they came by ship, if they left Halifax and came to Boston, there will be a record of the arrival in Boston. If they walked across the border or however, at that time, no, there would have been no record. The border was totally open. It wasn't until around 1900 that there started to be ports of entry. So you may find that. And the other thing with immigrants, especially with the Irish, you see with the Italians, is they came in. The whole family didn't come at once. It was a cost thing. Uh, you'll see them coming. Part of the family comes in one ship. A few years later, another part comes. In other words, the first group would arrive, make some money, send it back to the homeland to pay for the passage for the next group to come. So you may see, and it takes 2 or 3 groups for the entire family to get over here. That was fairly common for Irish immigration and Italian immigration.
Another thing I read was the Canada was sending wood to England because England was running out of wood for their navy, and they discovered that if they picked up passengers and brought them back to Canada, then they were, making money both ways on the trip. So, and there were also specific ports in Ireland that tended to go to specific ports in Canada. So, and the Canadians do have a lot of records in general, their national library, but immigration I'm not as familiar with. Don't forget that New York's not the only port in America. They may have come into Portland, Boston, Baltimore, Philadelphia, New Orleans, but we all think of New York first. And then I'm mentioning the Passenger Immigration List Index. It is just an index, so you won't find the actual entry for your person, but it'll tell you what book you can find it in. And we have many of them here in the library, so you could always check in with us and we could look it up for you. On the more recent immigration lists, it's really interesting to see they have to say who they were going to visit, where they were headed when they first got here, sometimes how much money they had in their pocket. But it's interesting to see who in the family, as Al was saying, they're coming in this chain migration, but who was here already and where were they living? And again, they might tell you the initial destination, even though they may have moved on to somewhere else. Whoops. And you want to look for neighbors as well. Oftentimes they would come, especially from Eastern Europe, you'd see groups of people coming from the same village together. Okay, court records, wills and probate records you can find on Family Search and Ancestry, and also on MyHeritage. It's a good way to, as we said earlier, find out who the family members were, what the relationships were, and the married names of the daughters, because they'll often leave money or land and they'll say, my daughter so-and-so with her married name. Okay, land records on Family Search. You might be searching by county or town. It depends on the area. Remembering that towns and county boundaries changed over time. And one of the best places a place I like is the Newberry Library in Chicago has a wonderful website that will show you how the boundaries are changing over time. They're both in terms of a map, and you'll see the boundaries change, and also a text list. So if you're like to read rather than look at the images, you can find it that way as well.
Yeah, so Connecticut is the exception, being records being kept by town. Our 8 counties have no real administrative function. Rhode Island's the same way, but pretty much everywhere else, it's records are going to be kept at the county level or the state level somehow. Now, as Connecticut evolved, the so-called daughter towns came off bigger towns, and the records didn't move with them. They stayed in the town that they were in originally. So understanding how the boundaries change, as Carol said, is going to be important to find not only land records, but vital records. So you got to know what the geographic structure was at the time of the record you're looking for.
Okay. So again, family relationships, who the daughters married, who were the neighbors, and the exact part of the town that your neighbors lived in. Your ancestors, sorry. I was fortunate, I had found an old map and it had the names of some geographic features like, the name of a stream and a little mountain. And I was actually able to figure out where my great grandfather's blacksmith shop was. And then I got on Google Maps and found the pond, and I could see the exact spot where it must have been. It was pretty cool. I could go and check it out. It's not there anymore, obviously, but it's pretty exciting when you can do that.
Now, here is, before we get there, one last thing on the land records. Here is probably the most least understood and underutilized concept with land records. If you have someone you're researching, a family that, let's say, was living in the 1700s or the 1800s, and as many were farmers. Most people lived in the country in those days. And let's say they owned land at the time of death. And let's say they did not have a will, which oftentimes would be the case. Without exception, it may be many years later, that land would have to change hands. There would have to be a recording of it to keep the chain of title intact. And we use this so much here to figure out family relationships where there is no will. I mean, it'd be great if it was the will, because it would name all the heirs. But the deed will talk about, as the land changed hands, about the legal heirs, that this was land formerly of so-and-so deceased. And sometimes it's the sale of the land is forced by, oftentimes these farmers had debts and the state couldn't pay it. So there was a sheriff's sale, and it would list all the legal heirs. So there you go. You get your entire family structure in a real estate deed. So it may have taken 10, 20, or even more years. And I guess there's rare exceptions where it never happened. The chain of title got messed up. But generally, you're going to find the land would get resolved somehow, somewhere, and it would be the deed would identify the heirs that were involved.
All right, we're going to take a quick look at ancestry and family search. So ancestry, you might use somebody else's tree, but you pretty much want to avoid that. And I said, there are trees and there are trees. Here's an entry for J. Smith Green, an ancestor of mine. And what are the sources this person had? One family tree, somebody else's family tree. Now, I'm not going to take you over there for the interest of time, but if we look at the same person in my tree, I have 25 sources. So, somebody else was researching him, that'd be great for them because there would be a lot of resources there that they could also look at. Okay, I think we're going to try to go live in here, and I'll just tell you ahead of time what we're going to look at. We're going to talk about the hints and suggestions that Ancestry puts up there for you, and they are getting more and more sophisticated. And the more and more data you put into your tree, the better their suggestions are going to get. It's, an example of artificial intelligence. We're going to talk about there's two different places you can do searches. There is a new kind of search that we were looking at that neither of us have used much. I don't know if anyone else has. We can quickly look at it. You can search the catalog, and I don't know that a lot of people are used to doing that. I think they tend to just go in and put the person's name in and fill out the little form. But they do have a catalog, and you can go in and you can actually just search for the AGBI, and then all of the records that come up will be AGBI records. We often end up doing that when people send us requests and they're not fully filled out, and we're trying to figure out what person they were, what record Ancestry was recommending for them. So that's a helpful way to get to AGBI things. You can, obviously, if you're a member, you can also look at the direct material. There are new features coming out all the time, and I'm going to put this in next month's newsletter which I'm stealing from someone else's newsletter, but I just found out that they are beta testing OCR on handwritten documents. And so you put them up in your, what do they call it? The gallery, and you can then have OCR try to do, or have the artificial intelligence try to do an OCR on it. And what do they call for an extra $10 a month? It's Pro, right? Is it Ancestry?
Yeah, Ancestry Pro, yeah. Yeah, is anyone using it? I mean,
Yeah.
I've not used it. Everyone I've spoken to doesn't find it worthwhile. It's just $10 a month. You can cancel it, but be interesting to hear if anyone out there is finding it valuable. I have not looked at it in at least a year now, so it may be better than it was. But I think, among other things, I think they have some charting features that come with that, but be interesting to hear if anyone has used it recently and what they think of it. Is it worth the $10 a month for it? Doesn't sound like anyone's using it, Carol.
Yeah. Anybody is, you can either,
Well,
there you go. Carol says Pro Tools is free for a month right now. And it's good for making corrections. Yeah, it does check your tree for errors. And I was thinking, yeah, you could just do it. You don't have to do it for a whole year. I think you can pay month by month. So maybe get it for a month, use that feature, and then drop it for a bit. All right, let's see if we can go out there. I'm gonna go to my share and let's see. Hang on for just a second. Make sure it's going here in Chrome. And there we go. That's not Ancestry. Hang on just a minute. Go here. Ancestry. All right, let's see if I can share this.
Anything.
All right, let's see. All right, are you guys seeing my Ancestry?
Yep.
Great, excellent. Okay, so we talked about the hints that they'll give you. You have these little trees here. Let me get into a particular person and I'll go for Catherine McBain. Come on. Okay, so this ancestress of mine, there are 7 hints right now. And so if I click on that, actually it's in there. You'll see some of them. There's a newspaper article. This is a birth record, marriage record. Some of these I have already. There's a photograph, there's a headstone, and another photograph. So those can be a good help. Now for searching, you can
So
either,
the value there, Carol, is that if you find one that you don't have, you can review it. And if you think that's something you like, that's relevant, then you can you can attach it to your tree to the appropriate person. So that then further documents your tree with a relevant record.
okay, so there's, I do think I have this actually. I'm pretty sure I do. But anyway, that's their marriage certificate, I believe. So,
Yeah, Ancestry will have Ancestry takes the raw material records that they obtain. They get a lot from Family Search, and then they create their own databases with everything. And that way, that's how they make everything searchable. So they may have the same record in multiple databases, and that may be why oftentimes you'll see the same record come up, but in a different one of their databases. But as you can see, Carol has, as should be done, attached a lot of ancestry sources to her tree there in the middle column. And if you scroll down, she may have attached from other sources. Yeah, so there's a web link that she's attached down there. And you can also, so you can attach other records to your tree in addition to the ancestry records. And it becomes a wonderful way of organizing everything. So you have your documentation right there for the relevant person that you're researching.
And in terms of searching, you can hit the search here or down here, search on Ancestry. They go to the same place. Okay, and then they give you a big, you can kind of hone your search if you want to over here using this little edit button. Another thing I kind of like to do, I've tried, is browse by collection. And that will group things like, okay, so there's all the census and voter stuff together, all the birth, marriage, and death together. So it's just a different way of looking at it, but sometimes it's helpful because if you're getting like 500, you're getting hundreds of things, having them organized like this can be.
So obviously, since there's in some of these records that they're coming up with as suggestions, there's 600 choices. Obviously, they're putting a lot of stuff in there that's not relevant. They do pretty good job of ranking it. What they think is the most relevant, they'll show first. And as Carol said early on, when you first start your tree, their suggestions aren't going to be necessarily all that good. The more information you get in the tree in terms of, say, a spouse, children, some dates, etc., their responses to the search function and hints becomes better. And Carol, if you could show them, if you just opened up one of your records back, if you go back to your to the tree itself. Yeah, keep going back. Yeah, you gotta go back and more.
Oh,
Back some more.
there we go.
Okay, so if you were to right click on, say, the 1880 census there,
You want me to hit the
view,
or
view, yeah, just hit view, and then view record. Okay, so now they're going to give you suggested records right there as you're finding a record you think is relevant, which Carol did because she attached it to her tree. Then they give you lots of suggested records that Ancestry thinks is relevant based upon the information you've already supplied that they're running through their algorithms. And again, the more information you have in your tree, the better these suggestions will be. And as you can see, they include newspapers.com, which they own, but you can't, unless you have a newspapers.com subscription, you won't be able to see it. But they tease you with that to get you to spend some more money with it. So you can see all over the place, they're giving you hints. Now this was not the case with Ancestry 15 years ago. This has come on and it's getting better and better and better. And it really saves a ton of time in doing research.
And you do find actually that because I checked it, some of these I have in my tree already. And I
Yes.
found when I was doing my grandfather, there was hardly anything. And then I added a whole bunch of records and lo and behold, they started coming up over here and suggested records. So they're just finding, a particular person, seeing that somebody else put a record on there and showing them to you and saying, maybe these would help. All right. Let's see. We are a little over time. I don't know. Do we want to take a quick look at family search or shall we call it a day? What do you think?
Let's see, maybe we can open it up, see what what great things people have.
All right. Yeah, do you want to just open up to discussion or?
Okay, I see a shaking head there, positive.
All right, let me get back to my.
I have some suggestions if you want them.
Yes, please, that's what we want to hear. We can always learn something.
Cool. Well, I wrote a list. It got way too long for this, but this is great. Very nice introduction by you two. I wanted to add to emphasize to people to always validate their information, because so many, you'll find as documents come in, especially like on Ancestry, for example, that many people have the same name generation after generation after generation, even women. And And if you just plug it in without thinking about it, you will start following the wrong paths all the way back. So you want to validate at least 2 or 3 pieces of information to prove that, say in the case of my great grandmother, Hannah Elizabeth Lehman. There was she had a daughter, Hannah Elizabeth. Her mother was Hannah Elizabeth. And I get documents for all 3 of them and other people on Ancestry. So I have to keep checking the dates to make sure that I'm attaching it to the right person. And one of the best ways to, you mentioned so being able to find a document again, but is to always cite your source, because, and like Elizabeth Shown Mills has many, many videos on that, but if you ever go to publish your tree, or, write a book and get published, or you make public presentations, you have to cite the author of that piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, while you were talking, Kent just put in the chat the same sort of thing as to how do you get that source information into the tree. It kind of comes along with the record, but
Mhm.
you then need to, what I do is I print, that's why I like to print it out. So I have it right there. And and Carol, I think, speaking for Carol, but she usually will copy and paste it into a Word document
That's what I
that
do.
contains the record itself. So
Yep.
either way works, but yeah, and then yes, refer to the works by Elizabeth Shown Mills as to how to take the information that Ancestry gives as the source and
Mhm.
put it in the proper format, because sometimes the way they present it isn't really the way it should be properly shown
You're
in
not kidding. Yep.
genealogical standards.
Yep. And when a document comes up on Ancestry, there's a right-hand column that has the information and the sources at the bottom, but you're right, it's always often a different format. But if that window isn't open, you can click on the vertical scroll bar and get the information that you need.
Right. And when you
Um,
print it out, you're asked, there's a little box to check if you want to print source information. Always do that. So,
I couldn't agree more. I do that all the time. I keep digital files and paper files of everything. I'm a paper person, but I need to work on it digitally. So I
yeah.
keep all those records. Um, can I add a couple more things? I don't
Yeah,
want
please
to
do,
talk the
Carol.
whole time. I always have use women's maiden names, but then afterwards I always put in parentheses the married name. So I still get the documents for that woman under her maiden name, but I can keep track of them. Like this grandmother I just said, I can keep track of which generation is who. That's just a tip I have. The other thing is, remember that everybody should remember that Family Search is a global tree, and that anyone in the world can add data for your family or anybody else's family. And it quite often is incorrect because they don't cite sources. So
Quite often, like almost all the time.
Well,
In
they
fact,
do, I
Carol was
mean,
going to
I
talk
didn't
about
want to
that a
say
little
that.
bit in the.
I
there
go in and
are,
make corrections to my family, but it is time consuming, but I want my family to be correct.
Yeah.
And I provide the documentation, which no one does. I mean, it's good for new ideas, and as long as you're going to check things, like looking at other people's trees on Ancestry is good for new ideas, but don't believe anything in anybody's tree. But Family Search really has tons of errors, and they're trying to get people to do it correctly. They now have had a column on the right-hand side saying, this information is, medium grade, and they want you to go in and check the things that are wrong. So they're trying to help people do it, but it's, people just throw things up. And it's this similar to Find a Grave, which is a great site for graves, but I love Find a Grave and I'm an editor on, but the people that photograph the tombstones, they're all volunteer contributors just for fun or for whatever.
Yeah.
They might spell the name wrong of the person or put in the incorrect data, or they don't it's never necessarily complete with family members. So if you find something that's incorrect, again, you can click on view source or just scroll down the page and you can contact them and just put in the correct information. And every time I've done that, it has been changed overnight. I'm actually stunned at the consistency of how often the sources for those sites actually change it quickly. I got two more quick things. One is I use artificial intelligence a lot, and I use Claude AI or Chat GPT. You have to use a good one, and they all do different things. But I often transcribe wills, for example. You scan it, feed it in, and it'll print it out for you, right? It transcribes it. But and it does millions of other things. Like now I get background on an area and a town and what it was like, and so I can again confirm those things, but add to my story. But you always have to check artificial intelligence. It doesn't do numbers well. There are a lot of things it doesn't do well. But if you have the document, you can just read through it and then make a few corrections. And it also hallucinates. So it's what they call hallucinate. It might write something that has nothing to do with what the document says. But, and you sit there going, what is it thinking? Well, it's not thinking, it's just hallucinating. And so you fix it, but you always have to check it. My last tip is I love Family Search full text search.
Yes.
And-
We run out of time, but yeah, we were going to talk about that.
Oh yeah. Well, it's if you go to Family Search and I don't know, you can search for experiments, but it's down on the bottom of the main homepage.
Yep.
I found things that have been major brick wall solutions. And it's been really helpful because it has everything they've scanned but have not indexed, but you can find it by words.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's why they went that way, because they were trying to manually index all their films, and they just said no as the technology came along. And Carol attended a session with them, right? And they've been expanding it to more databases than just land records and probate records.
Yeah, if you look now, it's huge. I mean, there are thousands now of databases that they've done it on. So every day it seems like there's a new piece of data in there.
I found my great-grandfather's name that confirmed he was in a certain town at a certain time in a scrapbook that some guy had assembled 150 years ago, and they just scanned the huge scrapbook, and it was incredible. It really is a staggering thing, but they have billions of records. So
Yeah.
Yes, more than anybody else. Yeah.
thank you for listening.
No,
Family
excellent
Search-
points. Yeah.
I was going to say Family Search is beta testing trees that you can put your own tree up and it won't be changed, and you can change it. Apparently you can put a tree up there now, but you have to put a whole new tree up each time you want to change it. So I signed up for it. I haven't had time to play with it, but it may be coming that you would be able to put a tree up there that isn't being changed by somebody else.
So Ken had a couple good things in the chat about in census records. And I remember when I took the BU certification course, this was in the first lesson, on census records, look on the page before and the page after, because you may find interesting people, relatives. And so that's that fan concept going on there. So don't limit yourself just to those few lines where your particular ancestor is shown.
Yeah, it's so much fun. I had like my grandparents like, oh, in 10 years, these two people are going to marry. And they're, it shouldn't surprise us. Who did you marry? The guy that lived next door, but it's pretty fun to find them. Somebody, Barbara said, be sure to download and print the sources of a database because sometimes it gets taken down and you can't find it again. That's true. I always cut and paste the URL as well, but that doesn't help you. You could try the Wayback Machine at Internet Archive and see if you can find an older version of it, but I haven't had great luck with that. But yeah, they do sometimes disappear. Well, it's about 2:45. So we'll probably wrap things up. Anybody else have anything pressing they really want to get out here and discuss?
Of a quick census issue. I was looking for my grandmother and her family in 1910 census. Could never find anything at Ancestry. Could find them in the city directory, and I couldn't understand why you can't find them in the census. So I was in Buffalo, went to the genealogy section of the library, found the enumeration district, had them pull the microfilm, went down, had the street, street number, got to that number of the house, and her family name is Hoyt, Hoit, listed in the census, WHITE. I don't know what went down at that discussion because they were not first generation here off of the boat. But how do you get white from Hoyt?
I could see that. It's what you hear, Yeah. And it's,
So,
yeah, I
you
have,
know, there's other, just don't, if you can't find it in the census, it was the city directory led me to it eventually.
I had a similar thing where Wilkinson gets mistranscribed a lot. And there was one census I couldn't find them in. And it was this tiny town in New Hampshire. I'm like, I'm just going to look at the whole town. It was only 8 pages long. And I got to
Yeah.
the second page and there they were. And Wilkinson had been mistranscribed.
Also,
Ray,
if
was
they're
that
not home,
go ahead, Carol.
if someone isn't home that day, they might be added at a page at the end of the census. They often added people that they had to go back and see. Or if the kids were in college, they're on a different census where they were, or in the military, they're on a different census. And the enumerators get spelling wrong all the time. They get ages wrong all the time. They change races. I mean, distant relatives, black, white, and mulatto, the same person. So you can't trust the census, but you can use it again as a piece to verify other pieces. You're lucky you were able to go to Buffalo and get the actual one. But-
Ray, was that the actual, was it a book that had been prepared off the census record, or was it a copy of the actual census form that you were looking at?
It was, somebody had copied, the census was on microfilm. So I assume it was, a microfilm of the original census record. And to make it more challenging is they just had initials of her parents and her brother. So if I didn't know that, JB Hoyt or JB White was Jesse Benton Hoyt, you'd never know who this person was.
Right.
Yeah, they
It
did
gets
that a
paid a
lot
lot.
down south. It makes me crazy. Just the initials. All
Me too.
right. Well, this has been fun. We'll have to do another one of these. It's kind of fun just to have this back and forth a little bit like the old days when we actually got together in the same place.
There's one more question, Carol, in the
Yeah.
chat.
You looking from Kent?
Yeah.
For recent ancestors that you knew or know, i.e. parents, grandparents, what documents do you need minimum? Well, if you're doing a, what do you call it? A heritage society,
Lineage application.
lineage application, you're going to need death certificate, marriage certificate, and birth certificate.
Yeah, generally the first 3 generations, yourself, your parents, your grandparents. Now, with the grandparents, they may have been born at a time and in a location where birth certificates were not used, but there may be an index, a different type of thing that wasn't a birth certificate. So, but the Lineage Society will know if those documents exist. So if you try to get away with just some type of index entry, they'll say, well, go, it exists, go find it. So, but that's pretty universal with all the major lineage societies.
And
So
if
that's going to get you back into the 1800s.
you're fortunate and your parents haven't died yet, when they do, get multiple copies of those death certificates while you're at it. It's, it may come in handy for your genealogy.
Can I add a quick anecdote?
Yep.
When Carol was talking before about you don't start at the back, you start now and you go back. I'm in a genealogy group here in Essex, Connecticut with a guy who's related to, anyway, who cares? But he's related to William Bradford, which I was going to mention earlier, because anyway, who cares? But he's working on a renovation of the museum for John and Priscilla Alden in Plymouth or in Duxbury, around there. And they had 10 kids, and those 10 kids each had 10 kids. And the museum, one of the things in the museum is there are tens of millions of Priscilla and John's descendants now. And we're working on maps and all sorts of things to show where they live all over the world. But you really do have to start right with yourself on one chart with your parents and work back and prove everything, because it's staggering how fast, you know, by the time you get to your great, I guess it is great grandparents, you've got 32 great whatever it is grandparents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it gets really complicated.
Sure does.
Thank you.
Yep, very, very much so. That's why you gotta stay organized. So,
Yeah. Well, all right. This has been really fun. It's great to see everybody.
Thank you.
And
yeah,
we'll check in with you next month. And if you're in the area, come by and see us.
Thank you.
Lady.
all right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Welcome.